All right, let's talk about setting. So, um, in your book, chapter on setting is chapter 4. It begins on page 284. And I'd like you to read to about 287. There's not much, we don't need to have a long video about this, but it's worth noting that setting is an important element to fiction that both supports the plot, helps the plot move forward, and gives us a context for our characters. And we have not gotten to characterization or point of view yet. I believe that's next week. But I want you to think a lot about how setting and plot interact as you read the stories in your syllabus for this week. So there are kind of these different categories of setting. You can have a temporal setting. Temporal is just a fancy word for time based. So the temporal setting of a piece of historical fiction is during that historical period that the fiction is written about, right? If you think about The Harvest, right? That temporal setting is in the past, but there's like this kind of time travel element to it because it also is radiating out, it's rippling out to the present existence of this young woman in The Harvest, right? There's also a physical setting, general and particular settings. Physical setting is exactly what it sounds like. That might be the geography of the place where the setting is. And it can be minute. It can get super detailed. So you could have a short story. The Yellow Wallpaper, for instance, is a short story that largely takes place within one room. And so the setting is that room. That room and its particular characteristics are really important to the story. You could also have a story that takes place in a city, a story that takes place in a rolling hillside, right? An island. So setting can be geographical. When you have an imaginary, like a fantasy story, I mean, all fiction is imagined, right? But much of the fiction we're reading is not. I think we're reading mostly non fantasy. We're reading a little bit of magical realism, but most everything that we'll be reading takes place in a physical existence in this world that we also live in. That you could point to in a map that is real, but the story itself is imagined. But when you get to fantasy, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, I mean, he created an entire world and the setting is not real, it's imagined, it's fantasy, and yet it's so important to the story, right? So, setting gives us everything we need to know about the context of what happens in the plot, how it happens, where it happens, and what the characters are doing when it happens. Setting is sort of the ground that our characters walk around on, the time they exist in. Um, yeah, I don't think I have more to say than that. I do want you to read these pages. Like I said, it is 284 to 287. Let me just verify that. Yes, 287. I'd like to read a little tiny example in your book on 286 from Italo Calvino's book, The Invisible City. Invisible Cities. I really like his writing a lot. I often forget to return to it, but I'm glad it's in the book. And you'll see exactly what we mean about why setting is important as we read this. Okay. So, The Invisible Cities is a collection of descriptions, almost kind of short stories. The chapters are different places, if I recall correctly. And they're invented, they're totally imagined, and they're improbable. They're not physically possible, many of them, but they're so beautiful that we feel like we're there. And setting, the whole point of literature is for us to time travel and to exist in another person's body and mind. And setting helps us really get to that place because we, as people moving around in a physical world, are never removed from our own setting. I am in this room right now, which is in a house, which is in a yard, which is in a city, which is in a state, which is in a country, right? I can't remove myself from any of those settings. And all of those things, the fact that I grew up as a white person in America informs my identity and my experience and who I would be as a character in a story, right? So setting is really, really important. Place is important in fiction. Okay, so it's especially important well, it's important for every element of fiction, but when you, like Italo Calvino, are trying to build a world that doesn't exist, it's very important, the setting, to be descriptive and clear and almost tangible about it. All right, so from Calvino's Invisible Cities. What makes Argia different from other cities is that it has earth instead of air. The streets are completely filled with dirt. Clay packs clay packs the rooms to the ceilings. On every stair, another stairway is set in negative. Over the roofs of the house hangs a layer of rocky terrain like skies with clouds. We do not know if the inhabitants can move about the city, widening the worm tunnels and the crevices where roots twist. The dampness destroys people's bodies, and they have scant strength. Everyone is better off remaining still, prone. Anyway, it is dark. From up here, nothing of Argia can be seen. Some say, it's down below there, and we can only believe them. The place is deserted. At night, putting your ear to the ground, you can sometimes hear a door slam. All right, so we have this terrible and terrifying description of a city that is made of dirt and people who live in it but are still. It sounds like a graveyard to me. It sounds like an entombment. And it is so descriptive. The setting is so clear that I feel a little suffocated because I can imagine being encased in the dirt of the city of Argia. All right, so notice in the stories that you're going to read, let's pull up your syllabus. Notice in the stories you're going to read for this week what the setting is. It's going to be, obviously, I paired the stories with the setting that are most, I think, effective for looking at setting. So you've got Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. I don't remember if that's in your book. Either way, you can certainly find it online. Same with A Pair of Tickets by Amy Tan. The Lady with the Dog by Anton Chekhov. All of those are online. What is not in line is your sample writing, how setting affects emotions, and Anton Chekhov's A Lady with the Dog. When we start to get to character and point of view next week, emotions will become really, really important. So this little sample essay in your book on page 327 about setting and emotions is like a preview to that. So please do read that. What I'd like from you for setting is a one-page response to a story of your choice, analyzing how setting impacts your experience with the story. Use the sample writing above as a model. So you're going to use Anton Chekhov's, or the sample writing, how setting affects emotions, and Chekhov's The Lady with the Dog as a sample. However, I think that's a bit longer than I'd like from you. I really only need a page from you. I just want you to think about how setting impacts something you read. Just to let you know, Girl is the shortest piece. I love it. It's Jamaica Kincaid does this fascinating thing with her short pieces of fiction where they almost feel like poetry. There's a lot of rhythm and a lot of really beautiful setting-based details in that piece. But it's short, so if you're short for time this week, I might consider really spending my time studying that one and writing about it. A Pair of Tickets is quite a bit longer, way more involved. I believe you can find that one online on YouTube, someone reading it. That would be a good option if you're running out of time. Lady with the Dog might be the longest, but A Pair of Tickets and Lady with the Dog might be tied. The Lady with the Dog is probably the most challenging with regard to reading level, so be aware of that. To be clear, you're reading all of these, but you're only writing about one of them, okay? I think that's all I have to say about setting, so let me close this out, read the rest on your own, and goodbye.